Namaskar. So, welcome to the new session. In the last session, I made a mention about the nostrils. Now, rather than explaining this great organ of ours, I will give you a taste of it as to how this organ is a marvelous organ. Even the anatomy physiology has not really thought of this nostril as such a marvelous organ. But sometimes I'd made a mention earlier in the sessions that it's a great organ presided over by a deity called Ashwini Kumars, who in Pantheon were recognized as, or are as recognized are divine physicians, physicians of the gods. And they are the presiding deity over the nostril, and they really work marvelously. As I already mentioned in an earlier session, that the processing of the breath in the nostril is a great marvel. Whatever the temperature outside, whatever the kind of weather, climate, temperature outside, the breath is filtered, the breath is processed in split second for it to become lungable. Because the breath of any temperature cannot reach the lungs. So the breath is made of body temperature, what you know as 98.5 Fahrenheit or 98.5. And in split second it is done. Sometimes the temperature outside could be sub-zero. It could be minus 8, 10, 12 degrees. And therefore the air that is outside the nose would be having that temperature. Or sometimes the temperature outside could be 50, 55 degrees. So in the atmosphere, the temperature of the air would be 50, 55 degrees, but by the time it reaches the lungs within matter of 1 or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, there is processing of it, on it, filtering, processing, culturing. When we eat the food in the mouth, we don't digest it in the mouth and eat it. Although much of the digestion takes place with salivary gland by the saliva. That's why we are told how the food should be eaten. It must be maintained in the mouth as long as it is needed, and then processed, masticated, etc., chewed, etc. So the saliva gets into it. It's a great function of the saliva as well, no doubt about it. But here, the breath is made lungable. It is almost processed and digested to be taken by the lungs as a nutrient. So a lot of processing take place in the nostrils, which is really a marvel. We have not considered the inside of the nose, and we don't consider it as much as we consider the cosmetic aspect of the nose, visible aspect of the nose. We want that to be beautiful, etc., etc. But the inner part of the nose, we go on cleaning once in a while or once in a day, etc. It is an enormous instrument to process the breath. Anyway, I will not say much on that, but I want you to experience how marvelous this organ. So I would suggest you that you settle down in Shavasana. And what I am going to illustrate for you and make you experience is that how in pranayamic breathing the nostril plays enormous role It's almost like a maestro in music handling an instrument. The instrument becomes a marvel in the hands of a maestro. He plays the musical instrument as a maestro, that we know what is the worth of that instrument when it is in the hands of the maestro, rather than an instrument not played, kept in its box, or when the instrument is played by amateur, then perhaps it becomes a horrible instrument for us. Instrument as such is not horrible. Musical instrument as such is not horrible, but when amateur is playing, we think it's a horrible instrument. While the fact is that the player is horrible player. So this nostril, with its celestial kind of forces in it, the celestial participation in it, it is really a marvel when it is in pranayamic process. So we will be trying to understand what the nose and nostril is in pranayamic process, which perhaps even a layman and common man can experience. So therefore, settle down in shavasana. Now, usually we are used to this that in popular pranayam, in consumer pranayam, consumeristic pranayam, fashionable pranayam, we are only aware of the fact that you should be aware of your breath which is going through the nostrils, in and out. And that has become today's yoga. That you should just be aware of your breath which is coming in the nostrils, going out through the nostrils. And it almost becomes a matter for meditation even. The neo meditation. There are lots of neo meditations based on merely the breath, which is just going in and out through the nostrils. And that becomes the very material today for neo meditation. That's all we know about it. That how the breath can be a conditioner to our mind when we are just trying to quietly sense our breath in the nostrils. So start sensing your breath in the nostrils while you are in shavasana. You can be in any supine position. You can be any position that is quite relaxed position for you. Suptavirasana, Matsyasana, Baddha Konasana, etc. Or even you could be just in plain shavasana. Or you could be even just sitting quietly, where you can be sitting for quite a while. And become breath aware, breath sensitive, watch the breath, observe the breath, sense the breath, be sensitized to breath and breathing, breath and breath awareness. So start feeling your breath in the nostrils, how the breath is coming in, how the breath is going out. And in neo pranayam, that breath is merely made little slower and maybe little deeper, finer and little deeper, gentler and little deeper, or tender and little deeper. And of course, it works as a marvelous mind conditioner, psychological mind conditioner. So if you are just breath aware in the nostrils, it will certainly quieten your mind significantly. It will organize the mind quite significantly. The mind will be quite organized, quite composed, quite sublimated by merely being breath aware. But then it cannot be done too long. How long are you going to observe the breath if it is just gently moving in and out? But let's see what happens in pranayam. Now in pranayam, we'll start playing the kind of a kind of music of the breath. Like music is played with several notes. You can't be playing music with just single note going on, like a siren. Then you don't say that is a music. Then we have various phrases of notes, composition of the notes, musical notes. When they come in proper order, proper kind of design, then that music is sonorous. Similarly, here we are going to work on that. Similarly, find out. So I want to make you aware, when you are feeling the breath now in the nostrils, which is going in and out, you just see the nostril as a one passage for in-breath, and similarly a passage for exhalations. So watch your breath slowly make it gentler and tender breath, softer breath, and little deeper as well, as you are doing voluntarily, and volitionally and willfully as well. So slow, soft, thin, rarefied, deeper. Let's focus on in breath, and let's keep the exhalation to background. Let the exhalation be reactive, and let's work on inhalations primarily. Now watch your inhalations. You will feel that your inhalations are not really having much variation. Each inhalation is going almost in uniform way. Although fact of the matter is that there are variations which go unnoticed. Now we should know there are various parts of the nostrils. What are those parts of the nostrils in the cavity of it? One is called membrane. Membrane is the outer side of the nostril. There is a membrane carpet. If you want to know what is membrane, insert your right index finger in the right nostril with the finger turned out, finger turned towards the right, and then insert the index finger into the nose. The part that you touch in the nostril is called membrane of the nostril. If you turn that index finger in, right index finger facing the left side, and when you insert, the part that you touch is called septum of the nose. Septum of the nose, which is the divider of the nostrils. Right nostril and left nostrils are divided by a wall in between, a partition in between. That's called membrane. Divider of the nose is called membrane. Then if you turn the index finger towards you, right hand index finger towards your face, and insert it, the part that you touch in the nostril is called floor of the nostril. The floor of the nostril. Okay. So membrane of the nostril, septum of the nostril, and floor of the nostril. Then if you insert the finger fully, the top of the finger touches a part of the nose. That is called roof of the nostril. Okay. And extreme gates, that's called gates of the nostrils. At the bottom of the nostrils, that's called the gates of the nostrils. So there are gates of the nostrils, there is roof of the nostril, then there is floor carpet of the nostril, membrane carpet of the nostril, and septum carpet of the nostril. Because it's a hairy part, and therefore it is carpet. You have hair in the nostrils on all the sides there, and therefore that's the hair part of it filters and holds the grosser dust from the air, arrests them so that the dust doesn't enter in the nostrils. And that's how the filtration takes place. And then there are turbines in the nostrils which are working on so many factors of the nostrils that it is made lungable. The temperature is regulated. To great extent, any moisture in the air, excessive moisture, to great extent that is also regulated to make it lungable. Because you know the humidity outside could be 100% to 1 or 2 or 5 or 10% or 20%. Now, so that changes the air which is going to enter the nose, and therefore that is also processed in the nostrils so that it is made lungable. So now as you are feeling the nostrils, now let's embark upon prana kriya and appreciate the marvel that a nostril is. Now we are going to work on inhalative process. So that inhalation which you are going to do as a conditioned inhalation will be slower, thinner, finer, and soft, deep as well. So it can be also in stages. Since the inhalation becomes fine and thin, it would not be like oil stream. It would be in wavy manner. It will be wavy pattern. So you can have waves as well, ripples as well. Now silently utter O, O, O as you inhale, and watch the interaction of your in breath and the nasal part. Where is it really touching? Where is it really touching? And how it is flowing. So try to understand the river of your inhalation. It's a river of inhalation, and try to understand its source, course, and mouth. Where does it end? Beginning of the inhalation, where does it touch? Which part of the nostrils it is touching? Then the whole course of your inhalation, like a river has a course, the course of inhalation and the mouth of inhalation, where the inhalation is having its terminal, where the inhalation ends for the exhalation to ensue. So find out the river, how it is touching the nostrils, what is the interaction of the in-breath awareness and nostril, which nasal part. Specifically understand the nasal part. With reference to nostril, try to understand the inhalation. In the following cycles, go for inhalation. As in father. So vowelization. It will be significantly different touch point for your in-breath. And therefore it will flow in a different channel. And therefore it will reach differently the terminal point. So source of the river, course of the river, mouth of the river. Now this is second river There will be significant difference between and You can juxtapose and compare and see the touch points are different, the passage is different, flow is different for the river and river Then comes the river E, as in sweet or in sweep, long E. There will be significant difference. So the breath has different designs, breath has different passages to flow, breath has different flows, and therefore the breath will be reaching differently the terminal. So we can again compare sometimes to have this clarity. E. See how with the prana kriya, the nostril becomes a musical instrument, and therefore it channelizes the breath differently each time. So has been done, has been done, E has been done. Now let's go to the next vowel, which is oo, as in fool, as in swoon. Ooh. So see the aerodynamics of breath changing, the flow of the breath changing, the passages of the breath changing by change of vowelizations. So see how marvelous this nostril is an instrument when it comes to pranayam and prana kriya. We are doing something very rudimentary aspect of pranayam to the fundamental and basic aspect of pranayam, that is prana kriya. The sound forms. These are called matrukas in Mantra Shastra. And the pranayam take recourse to matrukas, which you will hear about it if you have a peep into Mantra Shastra. Then, next vowel is A, as in angel. A, as in angel. So see how a different touch point for inhalation, different channel. When it should be definitely a slower, softer, thinner and deeper inhalation. And you will have to repeat and compare, juxtapose with other sound forms, other vowels, so that you get better clarity, and then you will know how the nostril is almost like a musical instrument playing the music of the breath. That is why in esoteric yoga, pranayama is considered as nada sadhana. See the nada here. How the nada is changing your scheme of your breath, in breath. Then next vowel is I, as in cycle. I. So see the touch point changes. So these are all prana nadis. You will identify enormous prana nadis in the nostrils through which the pranayamic breath flows. Your mechanical or even Voluntary breath doesn't flow that way. You don't really schematize. But here you are able to schematize, channelize by the prana kriya. That's why it is called pranayam and not shvasayam. After I, the next vowel is O. So find out how, again another variety you get, another different touch point, how it touches different parts of the nostril. Therefore, I told you to become sensitive about nasal, the membrane part, the septum part, the floor part, the roof part, and the gate part. So you will see how the breath is channelized differently by prana kriyas. Then au, au. So every time the sound form changes, the touch point of the in breath to the in the nostril changes. Then it also takes recourse to a channel. Every time different channel for different sound form. And therefore different river. Every time it's a different river. Then comes and the last one is aha. So these are 10 rivers because these are 10 vowels, long vowels. The 10 long vowels give you 10 rivers. So see, in so far as the breath is concerned, and if the breath is considered as river, as it should be considered as river in pranayam, there are 10 rivers originating from such a small organ which is hardly 1.5 inch of length from top to bottom of it. The 10 rivers have originated from here. 10 different rivers having different courses, having different channels, and reaching the terminal differently. So, if you recall, I was telling you that in the right nostril and left nostril you have 350 odd touch points and channels. So these are all prana nadis. So many prana nadis are there. Now we just took recourse to vowels and got introduced to 10 rivers. Now there are many rivers of the K class, S class, T class, T class, P class, and Y class. So K, K, G, G, Ng, C, C, J, J, N, T, T, D, D, N, T, Th, D, D, N, P, P, B, B, M, Y, R, L, V, Sh, Sh, S, H, L, Ksha. Nearly 35. Then if you vowelize each one of those into 10 vowelizations, such as K, Ka, Ki, Ko, Ke, etc., K, Kha, Ki, Ko, Ke, etc., G, Ga, Gi, Gu, Ge, etc., every time it will be different prana nadi through which the breath will be going. So understand how the nostril is a marvelous organ. So we need to develop these sensitivities. We need to do the brushing to the nasal organ by using these prana kriyas which are available from A to Kshaha. Because last letter in vernacular is Ksha, Ksha, Kshi, Kshu, Kshe, Kshai, Ksho, Kshau, Ksham, Kshaha. So that's why it is called A to Ksha. So there are those many passages. So you will understand enormous pranic network available in the nostrils. And by the by, I will tell you, it reminds me that there is a Upanishad called Akshamala Upanishad. Akshamala Upanishad, where the Devi's manifestation in the universal unfoldment has been explained. How each letter from A to Ksha manifests in this boundless universe. For a modern man, it expands to something called 15 billion light years. So all that whole universe, the enormous manifestations in the universe is because of these sound forms, of which the primary deity is Devi, Adi Devi or Adi Maya. And that is why the prana is manifestation of Devi within us. It's a Adi Devi kind of manifestation within us by way of the prana. That's why I introduced you to Pranamaya Kosha. So anyway, see how marvelous is this organ, the nostril. And these are all called nada. These sound forms are actually nada. And that is why there is a very famous quotation in our traditional text. Nadarupo smruto brahma, nadarupo janardanaha, nadarupat parashakti, tasman nadatmakam jagat. This verse has enormous purport. And here we understand how pranayam is related to nada sadhana. Anyway, that is highly intriguing philosophical concept. So therefore we won't be going into it. But I just wanted you to get a taste of the fact that this nostril is an enormous organ designed for actually pranayama, not for in-breath and out-breath and not for your smell perception as is understood by the modern man. It has enormous purpose in pranayam. It has been devised by archetypal plan for the this pranayamic act. So archetypal plan devised the human nose for pranayam, whereas we are using it just for shwasayam. So that is very unfortunate thing that we are meagerly using this high potential organ, high potency organ for a meager purpose of merely breathing and then living, and then moreover living for nonsense of life. True assessment of our life will only say that most of us are living our life for nonsense of life. We make very little sense in our life. If assessment is left to karma devatas, we make more blunders in life. Anyway, this nostril is basically devised by archetypal plan, by mind for pranayam. So just I gave you little glimpse of this marvelous organ by very fundamental and basic sensitivity act. Now some of you can try this nostril for all these sound forms. Basically you must be aware of these sound forms with the swara vyanjana combination. You get nearly 335 starting from A to Ksha. Then of course you can be using the combination, two-lettered breath. Inhalation with E, A, so on and so forth, and you get a design. So also you can use this breath for nama kriya. Now this question comes to most of the Occidental minds. Why there are 330 million deities in the Vedic pantheon? And why there are countless names for each deity? See, it's not just that there are 330 million deities. Each of the deity has several names as well. Almost each of the worshipful deity has Sahasranama, like Vishnu Sahasranama, Rama Sahasranama, Krishna Sahasranama, Ganesha Sahasranama, Datta Sahasranama, Shiva Sahasranama, Shakti Sahasranama, Lakshmi Sahasranama, Saraswati Sahasranama. Each deity worship worthy has Sahasranama. Why so many names? Say one deity like Krishna has so many names. Achyuta, Ananta, Govinda, Keshava, Madhava, Narayana, Vamana. So many names. From Krishna to Gopala, so many names. Why so many names, they say? Because they have not understood the human anatomy and physiology in the pranic dimension of it. See how the nostrils will work for so many namas. So if you are a Ganesha devotee, try to first understand various names given to Ganesha, such as Vinayaka, Ganaraya, and then there are so many names. You will get those who are Ganesh deities, they know there are so many names, Herambha. So there are 1001 names to Ganesha. Start using each name for each breathing, your breathing will change. You know Vishnu Sahasranama, you know those names of Vishnu. 1001 names to Vishnu, and more popularly we know the 16 names of Vishnu, starting from Achyuta, Ananta, Govinda, Keshava, Madhava, Vamana. So these names, for each breath start using these names, you will see the marvel which works for the Pranamaya Kosha to be cultured, Pranamaya Kosha to be addressed. That is why we have so many namas. It is because our embodiment is so constituted, and there is Pranamaya Kosha, and therefore just one nama will not be working comprehensively and profoundly. That's why one deity has several names. So even if you look into Mantra Rahasya, you will have this idea why Narayana has so many names. And they specify, because each one has different vibrations. And therefore they specify, Mantra Shastris, specify which name to be uttered when. Although the deity is one. So in Mantra Rahasya you will get some information about it. So these namas, Rama, Krishna, Govinda, Achyuta, Ananta, Narayana, Srinivasa. See, everywhere, while you are using it in your breath, the breath will have different functions, it will have different processes, it will have different course to flow. And that is why you will come to know about Pranamaya Kosha, that how it's a very profound system, and its network is on astronomical scale, immeasurable. Just as the universe is immeasurable, the Pranamaya Kosha, its network is immeasurable. That's why so many namas which come in the religious consciousness aspect of yoga. Anyway, so this was little introduction to nostril at a very primary level. So you can try this. In breath and out breath both can be tried. Today you tried only in breath, you can try for out breath also. So you will know how the vowels and consonants and matrukas work for out breath differently. Therefore the kumbhakas will be also corresponding to that. You retain the in breath. Therefore you retain the in breath the way it has been taken in. You retain the breath after the out breath. You retain that breath after the out breath, the way out breath has taken place. So there are so many ways for in breath to come in and out breath to go out. By prana kriya, by nama kriya. And therefore, there will be so many kinds of inhalations, so many kinds of exhalations, so many kinds of inner retentions, so many kinds of outer retentions. It is really a marvel to just carry out the field work. Just carry out the field work and understand and appreciate the marvel of this organ in prana process, prana kriya process, pranayamic process. Otherwise, it's not attended too much. You just want a good shape of the nostril, that's all. It should add to your beauty. Let me tell you one more point here. Nostrils so vitally contribute for our voice. You appreciate a very sonorous voice of a very proficient and maestro singer. You say celestial voice. Where do you identify the voice? Do you identify to the throat? You identify the voice to the throat. Whereas the voice depends on the nostrils as well. Like when you have cold or running nose, your voice changes. Anybody can identify that you are having cold by hearing your voice. So it's a major organ for voice and sound production of human oral system and vocal system. Because anything wrong there, that is going to work on your voice. That is going to work on sound production of your oratory system. But nobody gives that recognition to the nostrils. Nobody says the nostrils are contributing for sweet voice. They only identify the throat contributing for sweet voice. But the fact of the matter is something else. So as student of pranayama, we will come to know. So that was a bit of introduction to nostrils at a very beginner's level, which I did now. Trying to understand how the nostril is such a major instrument for pranayama. The other thing is that yesterday I touched upon it. I said the finger, digital pranayama, using fingers on the nose. Usually pranayama is identified by that. That becomes a mark of pranayama, that your fingers are on the nostrils and you are doing pranayama. But there is a long journey before you really take your fingers on the nostrils. First, try to have this sensitivity, understand the nasal role, nasal potentials before you really start using the fingers. Because once you know that nostril is a very versatile organ and it's a maestro, then using the fingers on the nostrils will become a much more difficult proposition, rather than merely blocking the nose and inhaling in the right and blocking the nose and exhaling in the left, etc., etc. And therefore, I suggest one should not dabble with nasal pranayama. There is a long way to explore before really fingers get onto the nostrils. And if you want to be doing it, and whenever you are qualified to be doing it, I told you about how to place the fingers, which fingers to be used. There is a pranayama mudra of the right hand only. Never venture pranayama by left hand as a variety, because then you are disturbing the tantric circuit of the nostrils and the hand. Right arm, hand only should be used. Thumb along with ring finger, small finger only to be used, and not to try with other fingers, other two fingers. That's called pranayama mudra. So look into Light on Pranayama, where you will get to know the pranayama mudra of the hand, and it's only that way the hand should be used, not in any other alternative ways. Then finally I just want to come to embark upon and tell you about yesterday I just made a passing reference. I said there are 70 odd kriyas. Like in asanas there are ashtadasha mahakriyas and they are too much for you. There are 18 mahakriyas and you say they are too much. Here they are nearly 70 on a gross plane. 70 on gross plane. I will just give the nomenclatures to it today. I will just list it out and try to have your own thought process to understand how there can be these nearly 70 Shwasa Kriyas. The first one is Arambha Kriya today, with which you started, nasal awareness, nasal sensitivity, breath and nostril interaction. So Prarambha Kriya, that's called Prarambha Kriya. Then there is Shwasa Kriya, act of in-breath. Uchwasa Kriya, act of out-breath. Then Shvasana Kriya, the act of both in breath and out breath considered. So Prarambha Kriya, Shvasa Kriya, Uchvasa Kriya, and Shvasana Kriya. Already 5. Then Antastambhana Kriya, Bahya Stambhana Kriya, another 2. That is written to Kriya. Then Yogis, Puraka Kriya, Rechak Kriya. Antar Kumbhaka Kriya, Bahya Kumbhaka Kriya. Kevala Kumbhaka Kriya of a yogi. Then there are Panchavayu Kriyas. Then there are Vayu Kriyas and Panchavayu Kriyas. Prana Kriya and Pancha Prana Kriya. If you are computing, we have already touched 13 Kriyas. Then Udyana Mudra Kriya, which is integral to pranayamic process. Moola Bandha Mudra Kriya, which is again integral to pranayamic process. Jalandhara Bandha Mudra Kriya, which is again integral to pranayamic process. Then there is Agnisara Kriya, Kapala Bhati Kriya. So far we have considered 18 Kriyas by just nomenclatures. Now listen to the following. Prithvi Prana Kriya, Prithvi Tattva Kriya, Apa Prana Kriya, Apa Tattva Kriya, Teja Prana Kriya, Teja Tattva Kriya, Vayu Prana Kriya, Vayu Tattva Kriya, Akasha Prana Kriya, Akasha Tattva Kriya. So this becomes almost 28 now, 28 Kriyas. We commence from 29th one. Mooladhara Prana Kriya, Mooladhara Chakra Kriya, Swadhisthana Prana Kriya, Swadhisthana Chakra Kriya, Manipuraka Prana Kriya, Manipuraka Chakra Kriya, Anahata Prana Kriya, Anahata Chakra Kriya, Agnya Prana Kriya, Agnya Chakra Kriya, then Shatchakra Prana Kriya and Shatchakra Kriya. Now we have come to nearly 40. Then, according to Patanjali's scheme, Desha Paridrushta Kriya, again it is a set, because there are so many locations for confinement. So Desha Paridrushta Kriya, which has so many confinements of our body. Then Kala Paridrushta Kriya, Sankhya Paridrushta Kriya. I explained this in the last session about Desha Paridrushta regulation, Kala Paridrushta regulation, Sankhya Paridrushta regulation, which is so important. Then comes Ida Nadi Kriya, Pingala Nadi Kriya, and Shunya Nadi Kriya of the nostrils. With reference to nostrils, there is Ida Nadi Kriya, Pingala Nadi Kriya, Shunya Nadi Kriya. Then there is Ujjayi Kriya, Viloma Sarpila Kriya. Then cluster of Kriyas with reference to designs and aerodynamics. As you are aware of this fact that there are so many graphic modulations of your breath, each graphic modulation is a kind of Kriya. So it's a cluster of Kriyas. Anuloma Pratiloma Kriya, Suryabhedana Chandrabhedana Kriya. Again it is a cluster. These are all clusters. That's why I said basic 70. Nadi Shodhana Kriya. Nadi Shodhana is a very popular pranayam, well-known pranayam, and also very efficacious pranayam. Then Shitali Shitakari Kriya with Kaki Mudra. Brahmari Kriya, Pranava Kriya, Mantropayoga Kriya, Nama Prayoga Kriya, Pratyahara Kriya, Chitta Laya Kriya. These are all aspects of pranayam. On the mental plane, these are the effects which must actualize. Then there is Karma Yoga Samskruti Kriya, Jnana Yoga Samskruti Kriya, Dhyana Yoga Samskruti Kriya, Aham Tattva Chayana Kriya, Bhakti Yoga Samskruti Kriya, Sthita Prajna Vritti Kriya. Bhagavad Gita 2nd chapter tells us about Sthita Prajna. What must be the breathing of Sthita Prajna? Then Gunatita Kriya, which comes in Bhagavad Gita 14th chapter. Then Yoga Vritti Kriya, which comes in 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Bhakti Vritti Kriya, which comes in 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And Prana Yajna Kriya, which comes in 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So these are all clusters. So if you compute, there are nearly 69 such kriyas. And therefore, lot of education, lot of orientation, lot of field work, lot of observatory work, lot of laboratory work is implied. So this is what is done in classical approach. And all these, there are bypass for consumer process. Today, the yoga that we have is consumeristic yoga, and therefore all these bypasses are taken, and therefore it would really not fructify as the science of yoga speaks about. So, with mention of those 70 odd prana kriyas in pranayam, shwasa kriyas in pranayam, I think that today's session should be concluded because of this enormous compressed stuff. You need to open it out and deal with it for your comprehensions. And there is enormous scope to be in lab psychosis, experimental process, observatory process, studious process. There is much to learn and study. Like as I've been saying, yoga is not something to be done and accomplished. There is a lot to learn and study about yoga through yoga. Rather than studying yoga from the books, there is another channel to learn yoga through yoga itself, which is so important. So, with that, we will end today's session. And of course, there is still to be continued on pranayam, because we will have to see how pranayam leads to dhyana, the yogic process, because I promised you that I will tell you about yogic process of dhyana, which was not really delineated earlier, because this was important material to be first conveyed to you. And then you will be able to understand how that third kind of dhyana in Patanjali's scheme is available, which is the seventh limb of Ashtanga Yoga. So we will have to see the lead up to that dhyana, dharana dhyan samadhi aspect of Ashtanga Yoga through pranayam. Pranayam is the corridor. Pranayam is the corridor which leads towards the antaranga of yoga, the quintessence of yoga, quintessential aspect of yoga, which is dharana dhyan samadhi. So we have yet to traverse some distance in pranayam to come to this point, which will give us or open out a portal to understand the dhyana of Ashtanga Yoga, the seventh limb of yoga. So with that, we end the today's session. Namaskar.